Fred, first of all, I'm bored. Bored. I mean, what the heck? You look at these people, they are dullards of the first order. Sunak, you could sleep just watching him all the time. And then Starmer comes on, and then we don't even get to the Lib Dems because they're too busy assing around, doing funfair rides and things. It really is, they really take people. And then what's more, they don't do anything that they promise to do in their manifestos.
It's hard to disagree, Eamon. When I last came on GB News, you talked about the need for more theatre in politics, and I don't think we've had much theatre since. It's been the manifesto launch is kind of case in point. I think in its sort of nearly 90 pages of pledges and announcements, plenty good things in there, but we haven't really seen an inspiring narrative from a Conservative Party that wants to be re-elected.
You know, I know you say there's plenty of good things in there, but I go, A, I've heard these talked about before. B, why have none of them been implemented up until now? C, is that the best you can come up with? Nothing new. Same stuff, potholes for roads. Good, but hear it again. People talk about it, but you know what? It will not be done. It will not be carried out.
Yeah. Well, your report from Mansfield, I think, was really interesting. The chap who was runs a shoe repair business actually speaks to the sort of thing the Conservative Party should be able to sell to the country and actually historically has been able to. If you listen to his complaints about his business, he's ultimately talking about inflation. He's talking about high cost of living. He's talking about taxation. If you a Conservative Party that campaigns to bring those down and also has a credible plan to bring those down is a Conservative Party that understands the building blocks of prosperity and how to win an election. I think then in the very, very long manifesto, there are bits of that in there that could be brought out a little bit, but a lot of it's got slightly lost. And I think it's been a manifesto which is. It feels like it's a manifesto written by people that have been in government for a very long time. Okay. You see what I mean?
Why didn't Sunak go for broke? I mean, he's going to be out of a job very, very shortly. Why didn't he just say, let's be really brave here with certain things?
I think partly in his nature, but also it's worth remembering the context in which he was elected leader of the Conservative Party and his whole approach around the relationship between the government and the Office for Budget Responsibility, for example, and the Bank of England, and a sort of particular vision of supposed credibility. So it's which when it comes to the point of a manifesto, which I think a manifesto should always be a very exciting calling card, like a banner for everyone to rally around. Yeah. And I think John mentioned immigration. I think this is a really good example of the sort of halfway but not all the way approach. So we said the Conservatives say they're going to cap immigration, but they don't name a number. Instead, they say that the person that's going to name a number will be the people at the Migration Advisory Committee. Yeah, that's a quango. But you can't go to the public and say we are going to make this great big change, and then actually an unelected organisation will then decide the detail of the change. I feel like, are you here to lead or are you here to
voted on by Parliament was their plan, and obviously they've been burnt, haven't they, by putting a number on it?
We were Labour. I'm standing in front of an open goal here. This is, you can just tap the ball in the back of the net. Why aren't they being more bullish about things?
It's a great question. I think, firstly, to John's point about the growth picture, I entirely agree. The manifesto doesn't quite answer some of those issues. I mean, they talk a good game on things like removing some outdated EU laws to make it easier to build things, but they could have done that any time in the last year and a half anyway.
I agree.
So come on, don't take Conservative voters for fools on this one. To your point about Labour, I think they are kind of haunted by losing so many elections on the trot. And they lost elections in 15, 17 and 19, especially 19, because the Conservative Party rightly managed to persuade the public that they would have been terrible on economic growth, terrible on public finances, basically just extremist left-wing. Now they're close to a victory, and a great victory, possibly their greatest victory ever. All they want to do is reduce every opportunity for attack. They're going to be very risk-averse. Keir Starmer knows his path to a majority is through the votes of Middle England.
How are they going to woo Middle England?
Well, I mean, the indication today is that point about drivers, being the party of drivers. One of the Conservatives' attacks at local levels, which actually really worked, has been on low-traffic neighbourhoods and ULEZ. Obviously, ULEZ didn't win the London mayoral, but it was a way of galvanising activism.
But dear God, if I have to endure any 20 mile an hour, any more 20 mile per hour zones, I have never seen or experienced anything so rubbish.
Yeah. Look how unpopular that's been in Labour-run Wales, and that's actually been a big weapon that Conservatives have been able to use.
This whole industry thing about this lack of growth and whatever. Basically, the country is rubbish. It's rubbish. Can anybody fix that? I mean, no matter what party you're in, are you in the hands of what's going on in the bigger, wider external world or not?
There's always things we can do domestically. There's always reforms that need to happen. A lot of our discussion is always about tax, but we've always missed the regulatory picture. We have pledges to build, over a million homes over the next Parliament from the Conservative Party. You can't do that without radically changing the rules around building homes to make it easier.
Laws and various things like that.
But then they're controversial at a local area. Labour wants to deregulate planning, but also at the same time, they want to make sure anyone can still block new developments in their local area. That's a contradiction which they're going to have to solve if they want to build more stuff. The Conservatives were making some interesting headway with things like doubling the size of Cambridge. That's very cool, that's very exciting. But some of the biggest areas of housing supply issue which are causing problems for the economy are actually in London, and we've seen terrible house building growth in London, and the Conservative and the government has always had powers to sort of turbocharge that with things called development orders, and they were never really used. And actually, if you look at the effect that that has on the wider economy, it means people can't move to the jobs they want to do more easily. It means families can't get the homes which are the right size for them. Things like stamp duty, which does raise a considerable amount of money, but stamp duty has ground the entire housing market to a halt. People end up having to, add a little loft extension instead of moving to a new house, and people are often unable to downsize because of the disincentive. These have huge effects throughout the wider economy, and it just remains unreformed.
Fred, I think that there is now this attitude amongst people that it's acceptable. You saw the girl last week with her banana milkshake and this guy here. And it really is quite threatening. But nobody seems to be being put off about it, which strikes me then that the penalties imposed on these people mustn't be strong enough.
I think I agree. This is a very bad sign for all of society. It's not just a tax on politicians, which is extraordinary. It's the sort of thing that a rich nation like Britain, that's been a democracy, one of the oldest democracies in the world, should never see. But also look at the vandalism happening in art galleries, led by Animal Rising or Just Stop Oil. These art galleries, worth remembering, we all have to go through security to get into them nowadays. There are scanners at the National Gallery. There are scanners at the British Museum, yet these protesters still manage to get their stuff in. It's a weird world where people that want to break the law seem to be able to do it at will, and then the law-abiding majority are always being sort of hemmed in and told what to do. It just doesn't work, and it can only lead to, it will go down a very, very bad route if we're not careful.
Well, if it was America, they don't seem to attack politicians in America the same way. That's because they'd be shot dead, wouldn't they, if they tried something?
Well, perhaps. Although it was worth remembering that around a decade ago there were actual congressmen, I think, shot while they were playing a baseball game.
Yeah, don't forget JFK as
that's
well.
the thing. So there's I mean, obviously, I wouldn't. There's a thing of political violence in America, which as well, which even though they might have a more aggressive law enforcement, doesn't mean that it's better over there by default.